SaintsFootballTalk.com. Elias J. Williams, Monday evening quarterback. These are getting so much harder to do. 22 passes, 6 runs, 7-3. We thrown 22 passes to 6 runs in a 7-3 game before halftime. First of all, I want to say that Spencer Rattler should have been benched after the second turnover when the score was still 7-0. You put Tyler Shuck in when the score is, if I'm not mistaken, 21-7. Or in other words, it's a 2-score game. That's when you put Tyler Shuck in. Did you think you were going to get a clean picture at the quarterback by putting him in those circumstances? 49 passes. Pretty sure that was the number 39. 49 passes of 39 between Shuck and Rattler. In what universe do you look at your receiving core, your quarterback, and your offensive line that includes Trevor Penning, who can't pass block from guard or tackle, Cesar Ruiz, Fuaga, Eric McCoy, all better at run blocking. And then the young rookie Kelvin Banks, who's probably the best pass blocker on the team right now. How do you look at offensive line, wide receiver, and quarterback and determine that the identity for this team and this offense specifically is to pass the ball 73% of the time in a 1-score game? That's not including what they finished at. So the argument that the Saints don't commit to the run because they fall behind early in the game holds no merit when the score is within 1 score. They don't commit to the run because Kellen Moore doesn't want to commit to the run. And that, people, is going to cause whichever quarterback he starts to struggle. I talked about it last week. Go and look at the Bills game. That's what it looks like when Kellen Moore commits to the run. Well, as a good friend of mine brought up, it's hard to commit to the run when you are averaging less than 3 yards per carry and you don't have anyone talented enough to rely on the run. That's a second legitimate excuse, almost as legitimate as, well, they don't run because they're down so quickly. Well, go back and look at the Eagles-Saints game from last year. A game that was within 1 score, 2 to 3 points the entire game. Jalen Hurts threw 38 passes in that game. And that was with having Saquon Barkley in the backfield. You want to know the difference between the Eagles team then in that game that clearly passed the ball versus ran the ball, and the team that the Eagles got by the end of the season that I believe was the only team in the league that ran the ball more than they passed? The only difference is, in my opinion, Nick Sirianni said, "Why the hell are we throwing the ball so much, Kellen?" Why are we spending so much time in the shotgun, Kellen? Why are we not committing to the run? And there was someone to reel in Kellen Moore. There's nobody to reel in Kellen Moore. He's passing 70% of the time in one-score games. And you wonder why your quarterback is getting hit so much. Because his play caller is putting the ball in his hands so often that the worst possible things that can happen outcome-wise from play to play do happen. Rattler's interceptions and turnovers have balanced out from what he showed earlier in the season. But that's because you put the ball in his hands too much. Rattler was averaging 35 passes per game. I repeat, in what universe do you look at the talent, at the three areas you need to be able to pass the ball, and say that we're going to be a team that passes the ball? Our identity is going to be a team that passes the ball 32 plus times a game. Jonathan Vilma was right. The Saints have no identity. Several times throughout that game, as much as people want to say Vilma was a terrible broadcaster, Vilma pointed out several times during that game, that Alvin Kamara only had 4 touches. He called it his Alvin Kamara watch. How often am I using him? Not just handing the ball off, but sometimes just using him as a decoy, using him in the pass game, making sure all eyes on Kamara, using him as a fixture of the offense. Why would I pass the ball 70% of the time when my best player on that team is still Alvin Kamara? And before he got injured, Kendre Miller was a really good runner-up to number 2 best player on that offense, and he was woefully underutilized prior to his injury. Why? Because your head coach doesn't want to commit to the run. It's not the team. You want to know why Mickey Loomis said, despite being in a developmental year, they were expecting more wins? Because he truly thought that Kellen Moore, although we could use a Kellen Winslow at tight end, if you watch those drops from Jawan, he thought Kellen Moore and his coaching staff would be an upgrade over Dennis Allen. Instead, you've got the Spider-Man looking at each other, because Kellen Moore is just the offensive version of Dennis Allen. Passive, questionable decision making. Just keep chopping wood. The decision making has been terrible from him and his staff, because nobody's telling him, Kellen, we're passing the ball too much. And we know that it's recognizable, because the Bills game, he talked and said he recognized they were in the gun too much, and that he wanted to get back under center. They called 8 play action passes in that game. They had success over 50% on those play action passes. They committed to the run, ran the ball consistently, whether it was averaging 2.4 yards per carry or 4.4 yards per carry. They stuck to the run game. What changed? And despite Shuck coming in, Kellen still didn't support him with the run game. Now, Shuck looked like a better on-time passer than Rattler did. Shuck's ball location was pretty good. There was some nice catch and runs from Shuck that we hadn't seen from Rattler. He put the ball in some good places. Now, the missed throws, I think, are going to be timing issues where he has to practice with that unit more often. So there's room for upside there. But what you can't have is Shuck throwing the ball 30, 28 plus, 30 plus times a game. It didn't work for Rattler. It's not going to work for Shuck. Right now, Kellen Moore is in over his head. Go back and look at that game. He looked exasperated, like he had no answers. And that's what's concerning, because he did have an answer. Just run the ball. At least if you run the ball, you might still lose. You probably will still lose. But you'll shorten the game and you'll give up fewer points. Look at what the Bucs did. 4 straight runs. They didn't score. But I would have ran it 3 straight times. I would have tried at least one pass, because Baker Mayfield is your best player still on that team. So I've put the ball in Baker's hands at least one of those 4 times. But the commitment to the run is exactly the message that you would want to send. And I applauded it. And the only thing that happened was they didn't score, but then they forced the Saints offense, which has been terrible anyway, to say, okay, we're going to get off the line of scrimmage and make a play here. And it resulted in a turnover. There is no winning formula without a run game. There's no winning formula without being able to stop the run. But it starts with the Saints on running the ball, because that will help both defense and offense. And that sits at the feet of your head coach, Kellen Moore. He's going to ruin both quarterbacks with the way that he calls games. They're a healthier team than they were last year. And they cannot score more than 19 points consistently. On the head coach's side of the ball, that is his expertise. Pick a side. Rattler, Shuck, doesn't matter. The enemy right now to that offense is Kellen Moore. SaintsFootballTalk.com. Monday evening quarterback. It's tough to watch these games right now. It's tough to even still come on here and give you this feedback. Because I don't mind my team losing. I mind the way that they're losing.